Hey guys, I'm JessiLeigh and today I'm going to show you how to put jeans on a dog. I mean in Photoshop. No dogs will be harmed in the making of this tutorial. Let's get started. First things first, this lovely dog photo comes courtesy of Ludestop. Now, in order to put jeans on her, we're first going to need to do an underpainting, or basically painting the grayscale values to map a denim texture too. This will make more sense later when we get to that. I'm not going to get too into the process of how I underpaint right now, as I plan to give that its own tutorial soon, but basically you want to paint where the darks, lights, and midtones will lie. While you're doing this, you'll want to paint in where all the folds might lie as well. I recommend making a new layer to sketch on before you shade these in, as well as looking at a reference photo of jeans to get more of an idea of how the fabric would behave. Another thing I like to do is, if I have one leg in front of another, is to paint each leg on its own separate layer. When you're satisfied with that, it's time to create a displacement map. Good news is you've already done half the work. We just need to duplicate what we've already done and adjust the levels on these new layers to increase the contrast, really darkening the shadows and lightening the highlights. Now hide all the layers except for the topmost shade layer you just adjusted. Save this somewhere you'll be able to find later, and preferably name it something with map in the file name, as this will be your displacement map. Repeat this for any other shading layers you have just adjusted. Once you're done with that, it's time to create the denim texture. Open a new document. The size will depend on the size of the image you're working with and the area you will need to cover. Looking at my image, I decided to go with 1000 by 1000 pixels. Now that you've created your document, find a blue that you like. I chose this nice dark one. Then, making sure your background color is set to white, go to your filter gallery and select halftone pattern from the sketch drop-down menu. Be sure that your pattern type is set to dot. I usually find that setting the size to 1 and the contrast to 10 works fairly well, but once again use discretion based on the images you're working with and what looks correct. For example, if you need a more close-up looking texture on a large image, you might want to set the size to 2 and the contrast to 15. Now go back to Filter, and from the drop-down menu go to Stylize and then Diffuse. Be sure to select Darken Only and then hit OK. Next, you're going to want to pick Hue and Saturation from the Adjustments menu and hit Colorized. If your foreground is still set to that blue we picked earlier, it will bring back more of a blue tint back into the texture. However, if you change your foreground color to, say, orange, you'll wind up with a more orange tint and you'll just have to find another blue, so try and keep your foreground to that blue we just picked. Anyway, adjust the lightness and saturation until you're satisfied with the color and hit OK. This looks pretty good, but we're not done yet. Make a new layer and fill it with the same blue as before. Go back to Filter and go to Render from the drop-down menu and choose Fibers. Adjust the variance and strength until you're satisfied and click OK. Now we're going to add a motion blur set at a 90-degree angle and a distance of about 70. Change the blending mode of this layer to soft light and adjust the opacity until you think it looks right before merging the two layers together. Now we're going to drag this layer over to our other document with the dog, because it's time to map our texture. To do this, make sure the denim layer is selected and placed over the area you're going to map. Then go to Filter, and from the drop-down menu go to Distort, then Displace. This is going to wrap our texture around the map we created earlier, stretching and wrapping it according to the dark and light values. The numbers on the horizontal and vertical scale determine how intense the wrap will be. The higher the numbers, the more intense. I find that 25 typically works pretty well. Click OK and a window will open up to choose your map. Choose the correct map for the layer you're on and click Open. Do the same for any remaining layers. This applies the map and your texture will appear as if it's wrapping around your object. Right now it's hard to see, but control-click the shade layer for the front leg to select the layer, and then add a layer mask to its corresponding denim layer. Repeat this for the back leg as well and change the blending mode of these layers to Overlay. Now you can see the effect more clearly, and these are finally starting to at least resemble jeans. To make things easier on myself, I moved each denim layer on top of its shade layer and deleted the higher contrast layers I used to create my displacement maps. I then merged my denim layers with their respective shade layer, as well as finally got around to actually naming my layers. And I'm sorry to anyone I drive crazy because I keep forgetting to name my layers, but I promise I'm working on this. Next, we're going to start on the details of the jeans, namely the seams. I duplicated the front leg and applied a layer mask. I also created a new layer filled with red at 50% opacity to help me see what I'm masking away. With my sketch layer turned back on, I masked away the side of the jeans to the left of the seam, leaving the right side. I added an inner shadow of white set to soft light at 75% opacity with a distance of 5 and a size of 6. I also added drop shadow at 36% opacity with a distance and size of 5, making sure to uncheck use global light. As always, these settings will be subject to your image and its lighting. Also, what I've just shown you is a shortcut, and isn't always feasible when creating jeans with scratch on a person, or in this case, a dog. In those situations, I usually paint the seam highlights by hand using a soft round brush with the blending mode of soft light, as you can see I'm doing right now, creating an additional highlight on top of what I've just created and lowering the opacity. Next, I duplicate this new highlight layer and press Command I to invert the color to black, and I shift the layer over by pressing the arrow keys a few times. To add the stitches, I choose a brownish orange color. I then selected a round hard brush, set the roundness to 20%, the spacing to 1000, and the size to 7. Apply shape dynamics and make sure the angle jitter control is set to direction and that all other jitter controls are set to off. Then just paint down the length of the seam, keeping in mind of the folds. Where you see a fold, there should be a break in the stitch line, as that would be hidden from view. Feel free to go back and erase and repaint any areas you're not satisfied with, and set the opacity to 50% once you're done. Group all these layers together when you're done and repeat these steps on the back leg. This is where you can start deciding just how you would like these jeans styled. I decided I'd rather have a double seam on these jeans and duplicated the stitch layer along with the shadow layer below it and moved it over to the rest beside the original. To create that wrinkled shading you typically see in the side seams of jeans, I created a new layer with a soft round brush and painted a random zigzag pattern along the seam. Once I was done, I lowered the opacity and erased the bits that went outside either side of the seams, keeping only that in the middle, and then setting the blending mode of the layer to soft light when I was done and repeating the same to the other leg. Deciding I'd like a bit more contrast, I then duplicated the zigzag layer, inverted it to black, and shifted it up a bit using the arrow keys. I think you pretty much got the idea, so I'll shut up and let you enjoy watching as I repeat these steps on the rest of the jeans. Just remember to keep looking at reference photos for help, seeing the placement of things like belt loops, pockets, and structural stitching. Actually, you know what? This is a good time to remind you all about my subscriber giveaway. Once I reach 500 subscribers, I will choose one at random and ship them one graphic tee of their choice from my TeePublic store. Look in the description for more info. Okay, shutting up now, enjoy the speed paint. Okay, before I move on to making the rivets, I'm going to fix these areas in the pant leg that are just a bit too bright. The easiest way I found to do this is the patch tool. Just pull the texture of a darker area into the too light area and it usually evens out. To make the rivets, just take a hard round brush in the color you wish your rivet to be, in a size appropriate to your image. Now paint a circle where you'd like your rivet. Next, we're going to add a bevel and emboss to our circle. First, choose a contour that you like. I experimented with different contours and eventually settled with one called Ring, but these are your rivets. You're designing these jeans, so choose what you think would look cool with what you've created so far. Now adjust the highlight and shadow of your bevel to reflect how shiny you'd like your rivet to appear. Shinier rivets would have a higher contrast, while duller rivets would have a softer contrast, or more muted highlights and shadows. Again, most of these settings are going to be subjective to your image and the lighting and placement of your rivet. When satisfied, rasterize the layer style and duplicate the layer to create each new rivet. As far as placement, if your rivet is going to lie on a surface that is slightly turned from you, pinch the width of the rivet to reflect more of an oval shape, because a rivet won't look like a perfect circle if you're not looking directly at the face of it. I also added a slight drop of shadow to the rivets. We're almost done. Group all the jeans layers together, make a copy, and then merge the copy group together. Take this time to refine everything you've done so far, fixing highlights and shadows, maybe adjusting how different parts of the jeans lay, last minute color adjustments if you decide that you'd like the jeans to maybe be lighter or darker, or maybe lower the saturation if you'd like them to be a little less blue. And don't forget to paint in the shadows that the jeans might create on the body. And there are your jeans. Technically, we could stop there, but when I paint clothes on a subject, I try to make it look as realistic as possible. This means making the jeans match the resolution of the dog image. This can be done in a multitude of ways depending on your image and what you need. In my case, the jeans were just much too sharp, especially around the edges. So I duplicated the jeans layer, and after a while of experimenting to see what worked with my image, I decided on adding a despeckle filter to a copy of my jeans layer with a lowered opacity, and using the blur tool to selectively blur the edges of the jean layer, as well as most of the back leg. However, moderation is key. You don't want to blur too much, just enough to make the layer blend in with the resolution and focal depth of the rest of the photo. After that, I grouped my jean layers again and applied a layer mask and masked out where I thought any little hairs might poke over the side. When creating something like this, details are key. Chances are, if these were real jeans, a few doggy hairs would be sticking out over the edges. Speaking of realism, I'm going to take this time to call myself out and say I really could have done better on those folds on the front pant leg. Maybe I'll paint jeans on a horse or something in the future and try to redeem myself for those. Alright, just a few more adjustments and I'm finished. Here is a dog wearing jeans. Let me know if you tried this out on your own in the comments. And before I end this video, it's time to feature some art. Take a look at this piece from Olivec. If you'd like to see more from her, I put her links in the description. Also, if you'd like a chance for your art to be featured in a future video, send me a link to your piece through my social media. All my links are down below. Thank you all for watching. If you liked this tutorial, or even if you didn't, check out these videos to the left. You might as well subscribe while you're at it. I put a video every week and I bet you don't want to miss that. Just click my face on the right to subscribe. Again, thank you all for watching. Bye!